Good afternoon, and welcome to another ironic introduction to another video. I am hammering out these path rundowns for Season 10. Just a disclaimer, Season 10 is not out yet, and it hasn't been, it won't be until next month. And for these nodes, please just assume that there is ISO infused and health boost in there. I am not going to be mentioning those, or even the champion boosts. You can just assume that they are part of the nodes, as they are fairly standard. So that said, for hard difficulty, which for the record, I'm in my alliance, we currently are running hard maps for Alliance War. So path 1 will have you going up here to the top, and you'll be going immediately left at node 1, which will be Starburst Electric Fluctuations, as well as followed by node 10, which will be the link node for Starburst Limber 10. So not much of a higher increased difficulty from intermediate, but still definitely adds its own challenges. And you'll move into the shared mini boss node here, if I can get the file up, which will be Quick Nullify Regeneration and Psychic Thorns. It's the same mini boss as intermediate. If you're like moving up in difficulty, it's just going to be a little tankier and a little bit harder hitting. And then for node 1, for path 1, you'll be moving into Recovery 100% Masochism, which is kind of a pain of a combination of nodes, especially for just like hard difficulty. But then you'll move into Recovery 100% Buffet. So path 1 here, I definitely think is going to be just very difficult just on the nodes alone. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I definitely think that there is challenge in the way those nodes are stacked. And then you'll move into your shared mini boss 43, which will be Backup Recovery and the Best Defense and Shank. And then you'll move into your mini boss shared, which will be Stun Immunity, Special 1 Lock, and Buff Duration, or Special Lock 1 and Buff Duration. So definitely a challenge. Yeah, I mean, my first impressions is that that's gonna be a frustrating path. Like, mechanically speaking, you're gonna want to send a very strong player up there just because of the nodes themselves. And then path 2, which I always like to think of path 2 as a relatively easy path as long as you're running specific champions, because you can really just kind of ignore a lot of the nodes. But you do have to be mindful of, well, some of the nodes in general. So here you'll have, going down to node 5, you'll have Poison with Enhanced Poison. So as long as you bring Poison immune, this is just essentially a face roll fight. And then you'll move into node 11, which will be Poison and Inverted Immunity Bleed. So if you are also bleed immune, I believe you just start with a bleed node instead. So you do kind of have to be mindful that you are bringing a strictly only poison immune champion, which I will be making a tier list for Suicide Mastery friendly champions relatively soon, and that will kind of encompass this. And then you'll move into your shared mini boss 15, which will be Quick Nullify Regeneration, Psychic Thorns. And then you'll move into the shared node. You'll move into your continued path, which will be Poison and Bleed Immunity, followed by Immunity, Poison, Immunity, Bleed as well. So again, I think that you could just kind of handle this whole path just with a specific champion, and like honestly just bring utility for the mini bosses from there. Not hard at all, I think. And then you will have your shared mini boss from there, which will be Backup Recovery, the Best Defense, and Shank, followed by node 46, which will be Stun Immunity, Special Lock 1, and Buff Duration. So if anything, I would highly recommend that you maybe have your person who's going down path 2 handle the mini bosses for the most part, and they can bring the utility for those. Maybe like you have the person on path 1 clear first, and then they move into the mini boss to kind of give you an idea of what it is, if possible, because I believe these aren't hidden anymore, or maybe you can see it up front. But then you have person going down path 2 bring their one champion who's poison immune to take down the nodes, maybe 2 just in case they mess up, and then they will bring like a third champion for utility to handle the mini bosses. For path 3, you will move here, going top right. You will have Quick Nullify Regeneration, followed by node 16, which will be Psychic Thorns. Oh, I apologize. Node 6 here to start is actually Psychic Thorns Quick Nullify Regeneration, followed by node 16, which will be Psychic Thorns Heal Block. And then you'll move into your shared mini boss 15, which will be Quick Nullify Psychic Thorns. So maybe actually for this whole set, you have Path 3 handle the mini boss just here, just because they'll already be prepping a team to handle Psychic Thorns, and that just might be the most manageable there. And then you'll move into node 28 here, which will be the best defense as well as Shank, followed by node 35, which will be the best defense and backup recovery. You'll then move into your shared mini boss backup recovery, the best defense Shank, followed by your shared mini boss, which will be stun immunity, special lock 1, and buff duration. I apologize for the barking in the background. Not really anything I can do about that, unfortunately, just at this time. For Path 4, going down the middle and then up, you will have node 3, which will be Spite and buff toggle unstoppable, followed by node 19, which will be Spite heavy hitter. And then you'll move into your shared mini boss here, which will be buff toggle unstoppable, power focus, and breakthrough. I definitely think someone like Symbiote Supreme, maybe even Ebony Maw if he turns out to be a decent attacker. Anyone with like a nullify ability here should be helpful here, I believe. But some of those interactions play out differently than I think. And then you'll move into your split path here of mini bosses, which will be Opportunist, Optimist, Enhanced Fury going up, and you'll have Sadist, Pessimist, Enhanced Armor up going right. So not much of a change from intermediate, definitely reasonable to handle. Moving up into your path further, you will have node 24, which will be Redouble Determination, buff duration, followed by node 36, which will be Redouble Determination, strike back. And then you'll move into your shared mini boss here, which will be limited immunity, Redouble Determination, and buff toggle unblockable. Unblockable is a pain in the arse, but as long as you bring nullify to handle it, you should completely just ignore it. Like Captain America Infinity War, I believe, has a way, if you bring a skill champion with you, to handle that. I believe. I'm sorry if I'm wrong. Then from there, you'll move into your shared mini boss, which will be Tank Buster, Resistor, Kinetic, Instigator. So resetting again, moving into path 5, you will go down the middle here and you'll have Enhanced Special 1, Special 1 Bias, and Power Focus. And then you'll move into node 14 here, which will be Enhanced Special 2, Special 2 Bias, Power Focus. I think like Hyperion's a really good Special 2 focus just because he's got that stun there. I would even make the argument like Hulk Ragnarok is probably a good defender for Special 1 Bias just because of the heal block. But people will be aware of it, so it's not as sneaky. And then moving into your split bosses, again, you will have the Opportunist, Optimist, Enhanced Fury if you move up, and if you move down right, you will have the Sadist, Pessimist, Enhanced Armor up. I actually really like this. It feels like a gate, like happy, sad kind of a thing, kind of a standard cliche there. And then continuing down your path for path 5, you will have node 29 here, which will be buff toggle, unstoppable, Special 1 Bias. Am I doing this right? Yeah, that's just a recurring theme down the middle here. And then node 33 here, which will be buff toggle, unblockable. Sorry, I misspoke. This is buff toggle, unblockable, followed by another buff toggle, unblockable, Special 2 Bias, champion boost. And then you'll have your mini boss shared, which will be limited immunity, redouble determination, buff toggle, unblockable. If I misspoke about that last time, I apologize. And then you'll move into your shared mini boss here, 41, which will be Tank Buster, Resistor, Kinetic, Instigator. And then for path 6, you will start with All or Nothing Breakthrough, and then you will move into node 21, which will be All or Nothing Fisticuffs. I think this is like, as long as the person you're playing with has good mechanics, those nodes are relatively easy to handle. And then you'll move into your shared mini boss, which will be buff toggle, unstoppable, power focus, breakthrough. And then you'll have your shared mini boss split gate of your Opportunist, Optimist, Enhanced Fury, or your Pessimist, Sadist, Enhanced Armor up. Continuing your path, you'll have node 25, which will be boosted buff armor up, as well as limited immunities, followed by node 38, which will be boosted buff armor up and caltrops. And then you'll move into your shared mini boss here, which will be node 37, limited immunity, redouble determination, and buff toggle unblockable. And then you'll move into node 41 here, which will be Tank Buster, Resistor, Kinetic, Instigator. And then the final bosses. Just a moment, I need something to drink really quick. That's a lot of talking in a very short period of time, which I talk a lot. So for that to make me feel like it's a lot of talking, it's a lot of talking. Okay, path 7 here. You will move up here, and this is the path that they talked about where there will be hidden nodes. So you do have to be mindful that if you're going this route, you are gonna want to have a pretty safe roster, right? Like you want to be careful not to bring anyone who's like reliant on proccing bleeds in case you're running into someone who's bleed immune. That's why I think champions who have like a built-in anti-bleed immune setup, like X23 handles bleed immune okay. Ronin I think is actually better against bleed immune champions than he is against champions who can bleed. So just be careful. This is the hidden path route, specifically path 7. If anything, this is probably where you want to send your best player, just to be precautionary wise, because I imagine this is where people will stick their things. This is where they like the thing. This is where people will stick their Korgs. So this is probably going to be one of the worst paths mechanically speaking. And so you will have Breakthrough Bane, followed by Bubble Shield Masochism. So not only is it hidden, but it's also kind of some pretty solid nodes there. And then you will have your shared mini-boss here, node 18, which will be Long Distance Relationship and Aegis Heavy. I imagine this is probably where most people will have their backup follow-through just in case, especially since with a pool of 6 champions, you have a little more responses to nodes that you're unaware of. But continuing on down path 7, you will have node 30, which will be Power Start 1, Heal Block. So you can at least get kind of an idea of what will be here as you get to higher tiers, as there will be like a best in slot for Power Start 1. And then you'll have node 39, which will be Protection Shielding and Plagued Mind 1, which is always fun and enjoyable. And then you'll move into mini boss 44 here, which will be Close Encounters, Prey on the Weak, Protection Shielding, and your mini boss 47, which will be True Strike, Power Shield, Kinetic Transference. Following back, moving into path 8, which hopefully is a little bit easier, you will have Long Distance Relationship, Power Bond, and Mighty Charge, followed by node 12, which will be Long Distance Relationship, Buffet. So no forgiveness here on node 8. Actually, there's additional link nodes on this path than there are on the other paths. So do just be mindful of that, as it does look like this is probably the middle path and the far right one are probably the harder paths just in general. So you will then have your mini boss 18, which will be your Long Distance Relationship, Aegis Heavy. And then you'll move down your path to node 31, which will be your Close Encounters, Power Shield, Heal Block. Moving into node 40, which will be your Close Encounters, Prey on the Weak, Plagued Mind. And then from there, you'll move into your shared mini bosses, Close Encounters, Prey on the Weak, Protection Shielding, as well as True Strike, Power Shield, Kinetic Transference. Whew. And then the last path, thankfully, will have you going down path 9, which will be Backup Recovery, Confusion, followed by the node, which will be Backup Recovery, Aegis Heavy. So already I think this is an easy path in comparison. And then you'll have your shared mini boss, which will be Long Distance Relationship, Aegis Heavy. And then moving down your path, continuing, you will have Force of Will, Confusion, followed by node 45, which will be Resistor, Force of Will. And then you'll have your shared mini bosses, which are 44, Close Encounters, Prey on the Weak, and Protection Shielding, followed by 47, which will be True Strike, Power Shield, and Kinetic Transference. So hopefully, your alliance clears all 9 paths. You guys meet up at the middle. And again, my first path here will be going up right to the final boss. And so if you're going up and clearing this first mini boss, you will have node 48, which will be Limber 10, Stun, Bleed, and Poison Immune. And then you will move into node 51, which will be Kinetic Reactor, Plagued Mind, Limber 10, and followed by the final boss. Because the Limber 10 is like set there, you can still bring champions who stun for prolonged periods of time, and that you don't have to worry about that Limber 10 really throwing you off I think like Hyperion Special 2 is a solid long stun. You shouldn't have to worry about. Hulk Ragnarok stun is a little bit longer. In particular, like I think Luke Cage. I just think these are champions that will handle this path fairly well, as they're not bleed or poison reliant, as well as their stuns that they have are long enough that a Limber 10 won't affect them. Yeah. And if you are taking the next path, which I will claim up, skipping this first mini boss because hopefully person on path 1 cleared it for you, and then right to the boss. So you'll move up into node 50 for enhanced special 1, physical resistance 20, limber 10. And then you'll move into your link to node 53, which will be enhanced special 2 bias power gain 100%. I hate these paths, but hey, maybe people handle this a lot better than I do. And then your third path to the boss, which I will deem right middle to the boss, will be starting with node 49, will be True Strike, Outlast, Mirror Image, Stun Immunity. So that one's kind of going to be a pain. Good luck with that. At the moment, I don't have any recommendations for how to handle that path, but if I come up with one, I will definitely let you know. And then from there, you will move into the middle path, which will be Kinetic Reactor, Plagued Mind, Limber 10. And then the final path to the boss, assuming someone else cleared your first mini boss for you, will be node 52, which will be recovery 100%, plagued mind, armor 20%. I think Mephisto is probably a solid defender to place here. I also like putting Nebula on recovery nodes personally. Even Angela might be pretty decent here. And then you'll move into the link node 55, which will be stun immune, bleed immune, poison immune. And I should make the mental note that node 48 over here is not stun, poison, and bleed immunity. It is stun, period, or stun, comma, bleed, poison, immunity. But continuing down this final path, that was node 55, and then you'll move into the final boss. And the final boss for the hard difficulty is going to be stun immunity, True Strike, physical resistance 20. And I actually feel like putting True Strike on there might make it not a hard fight in comparison, but maybe I'm wrong. I do know that that does get around a lot of champions that are in the higher tier attacker list in particular. So that said, that is a path rundown for hard. And I did comment that I would talk about new buffs, so I'll put in the description of the intermediate rundown that if you want those to come check out this video. But the new buffs, if you're like, oh, I'm not familiar with that buff, don't worry, neither am I. But inverted immunity bleed is that the attacker receives a bleed debuff every X seconds, dealing 0 damage if this debuff is removed or prevented from activating. The attacker instead loses Y% of their max health instantly. So essentially, if you are bleed immune or have a way of shrugging debuffs, this node is something you have to worry about. But if you don't have a way of shrugging debuffs, you can just ignore this one. So as far as like defenders go, I mean, I would highly expect to have bleeders here, right? Of course, because essentially what they're saying is you can't bring a bleed immune champion to this node, otherwise you will take a huge portion of your max health instantly every X seconds. But as a result, champions that bleed, like Domino here, I'm having trouble thinking of other ones. I know there's a champion that every time you attack them, it procs a bleed on you. Is that Morningstar? It might be Morningstar Awakened. So those kinds of champions will be really good defenders here because people will have no choice but to suffer from that. Unfortunately, I think all that does is really increase the value of Coagulate as a mastery. And other than that, I don't think that there is any great way to handle the way this works. Not that I can think of, at least. Besides regeneration, maybe, and or just like high burst champions, or champions that... or champions like Hulk Ragnarok who heal. That's going to be a tricky one. Other people will come up with a better solution to this, or once I've seen it and can play against it, then I'll have an idea. Next, you'll have Quick Nullify Regen, which is whenever the attacker gains a regeneration buff, it is nullified after X seconds. So that's not bad. For the most part, just, it kills your ability to sustain. Just bring attackers that don't rely on regeneration and you'll be fine. Buff toggle unstoppable is every X seconds the defender gains an unstoppable buff for Y seconds. So again, as long as you bring a champion that nullifies those, this node is super easy. I think even like Symbiote Supreme, like this node is great for Symbiote Supreme because you're just getting free charge bar every time. Buff toggle unblockable is the same thing except unblockable. Boost buff unstoppable is that if the defender were to gain a unstoppable buff, you would, here, let me move this over here so you guys can see what I'm reading. There we go. Buff toggle boost buff unstoppable is if the defender's unstoppable buff gains duration and ability accuracy. And when it's active in particular, they fight more aggressively, which is not what you want when they are unstoppable. Boosted buff armor up is armor up buffs gain additional duration as well as ability accuracy, and when struck with a critical hit, it will instead remove one armor up buff and reduce the damage to 0. So essentially you need to crit in order to remove their armor buffs and or be a non-crit reliant champion. I think Crossbones doesn't crit ever, or has like a way of prepping crit. Ghost is also someone who just can't crit unless you're phasing, and like those are terrible ways to have to deal with this fight, especially with armor up. Honestly, the proper way to handle this is probably to just bring an energy damaging champion and or someone who bleeds or poisons, because then you can just ignore the armor. As well as like the crit hitting, right? Because then you're not relying on your crits for damage. Psychic Thorns. Now this is one that I think people will have a lot of frustration with, but I think this one actually has like clever interactions with champions and will force like a roster selection. So it is when the defender is struck with a physical contact attack, the attacker takes X% of the defender's attack as direct damage. Striking the defender with any non-contact attack heals the attacker for Y% of the damage dealt. And so a lot of people look at that and they say, oh, if I hit with a physical attack, I'm just taking damage. That's not interactive. But the second part makes it interactive. Striking the defender with any non-contact attack heals. So like Iron Man Infinity War has attacks that alternate between physical and non-physical. I believe Domino's medium attack is non-physical because it's a gun shot. Ebony Maw, I believe Magneto has non-physical attacks, and so there's a lot of options that I'm not even aware of that let you get around this. Like, yeah, you can't bring Ghost, yeah, you can't bring Corvus Glaive, but let me just see if I can't pop over to my champions really quick and see if like there are tons of options. I believe all of Symbiote Supreme's attacks completely ignore this, because I believe all of his attacks are like non-physical. Void, if you go into this fight with Void and you just slow play it, you can get around this. I believe Sentinel Bishop has a non-physical attack with his gunshot. And so really what this will take is it'll take some time as people like try to get a gauge of like who is good here. Because to an extent you can still attack them with physical contact spells as long as part of your combo is non-physical, so you're healing for the same amount. And I think that'll be really interesting on how people mitigate that. And I think this is more interactive than it appears at first glance. It's just a champion selection thing, as well as like a playstyle. Like Iron Man, you can do your full combo, and even if you take more damage than you receive, you can then switch to short combos, as well as like backdraft intercepting in order to get boosted health. And actually, you could end this fight 100% health just as a result of the boosted healing. So continuing on, new node Power Focus will be the defender gains X% power rate while below 1 bar of power, but suffers reduced power rate while above. So in particular is essentially saying champions that have really good special ones put here. And Power Focus 2 will be the same, and again, same theory, champions with really good special 2s put here. And so again, I'm really bad at thinking about special ones, but I think this will be interesting. Again, this is just like you want to put people who are really good at dodging specials and baiting specials here, because that's what that node is all about. The best defense is the defender gains % evade and auto block ability accuracy. Triggering evade or auto block automatically gives the defender % of a bar power. And for this one, you just really gotta bring True Strike or anti-evade / auto block mechanics. Like really just gotta bring that to this. Otherwise, you're just gonna get absolutely obliterated by, total crap. I mean, we're gonna see Nightcrawler, we're gonna see Domino, we're gonna see Iron Man Infinity War. Like, this is not gonna be a fun path at all. But at the end of the day, Call Obsidian will wreck this path, I'm sure. Proxima Midnight, I believe, has True Strike. Heimdall, like if you're someone who runs Heimdall in your backline, you could take this node down with just your Heimdall. Moving on, you'll have Greater Confusion, which is, wow. Sorry, I was just surprised by what I was reading. The attacker suffers from reverse controls throughout the fight. And I know a lot of people really hate reverse controls, but I love it. Not like love it like every time it happens to me I hate it, but the reason I think reverse controls is so cool is that mentally flipping the controls in your head is a skill thing. It's not talent. Like, you aren't just naturally good at that. It is practice, because essentially you have to relearn the whole game with a whole different control setup. And a lot of people are like, that's not interactive. In my opinion, reverse controls is the definition of interactive. It is pure definition of, this is something you have to practice in order to get good at and do. And in my opinion, that's what interactive is. Interactive is, you either have to plan, you either have to set up a specific practicing setup. I think this will be a really good way for people to like set like Emma Frost as their main champion and then do a rotation of duels against her just to kind of practice reverse controls. The Nameless Thanos fight was a really good time to practice those. And because it's the whole fight, it's really reasonable. And then you'll have Confusion, which is reverse controls for the first X seconds of the fight. I actually think this is harder to manage than Greater Confusion because it's really easy to turn on the switch of, oh, I'm doing reverse controls, but trying to switch mid-fight is very frustrating. And because it's a timer and not like during a special animation thing, you kind of have to watch the timer and make sure you don't get completely destroyed making a mistake in the middle of a inverted control switching. So I wonder how that interaction is. It is important to note that light attacking and blocking are not affected by inverted controls. And so if you are in a situation where that timer is about to run up, make sure you're just in a combo setting or you're holding block and you'll be relatively okay. Maybe eat a heavy attack or something. And then Aegis Intercept. Whoops. Not what I wanted. Aegis Intercept is the defender begins with X indestructible charges. Intercepting the defender's attack removes 1 charge. I am so glad that it's not on the hard difficulty. That would be absolutely insane. This is going to be tough. Like, that's a tough node and is something purely for high skill champ players. Like, intercepting is so difficult in this game in comparison to a lot of the other mechanics. But I think it's cool that they put in there, as long as the number of charges isn't like crazy. Like, if it's like 1 charge for the next difficulty after hard for like challenger, and if it's like 2 charges for expert, I think that's really reasonable. But if it's like 3 charges for hard for challenger and 5 charges for expert, this is absolutely terrible. But Aegis Heavy is the same thing except with heavy attacks. I think that's much easier as long as you have Petrify, or no, sorry, as long as you have Stupefy Mastery unlocked, just because this is going to be much harder, except that with Aegis Heavy being a node, you can fully expect people to stick Rogue, I'm really drawing a blank here, King Groot, I think. You really expect people to stick champions here who essentially cannot be parried, and then expect them to have maxed limber, because then they are putting you in a position where in order to heavy attack them, you are like SOL. So I think these 2 nodes are going to be like incredibly hard to deal with. Like, and the fact that Aegis Heavy pops up on the hard difficulty, I think this might need to get taken off of hard. Just because of champion interaction, these 2 nodes can be incredibly difficult based on how you set them up with your champions, especially Aegis Heavy, just with limber and stun immune champions. So those are the new nodes, and that is a path rundown for hard. I will put a description in the description for intermediate if you watch that. So I hope you got to this, and I'll put a timestamp in here at some point in the future when I have more time. Other than that, it's been good making this video. It's good talking to you guys, and I apologize. It's been good talking to you guys and girls. It's just a figure of speech, but I want to make sure I do it proper. But I will talk to you later.